Another movie that I would strongly recommend to all my supernatural, thriller, horror, suspense fans. I would assume most of you have seen it, but to those of you who haven't, it's available to watch on Amazon Prime and Max. Soon after their showdown with evil spirits that possess their son, the Lamberts are ready for their lives to return to normal. However, something still is seriously off, especially with Josh, who, unbeknown to Renee, is possessed too. In order to free Josh's soul and finally defeat the malevolent forces around them, Lorraine Lambert, his mother, and her ghost hunting friends investigate the past to save her family's future. Now, again, it's not surprising to me that a lot of these sources like Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes and them have given them low scores and low percentage ratings, with Rotten Tomatoes giving them 39, Metacritic giving them 40. Internet Movie Database was a little bit higher. They gave them 65, and most of the Google users gave it on average 86%. The movie came out in 2013. The budget was $5 million. The box office was $162 million. Amazing numbers for a horror film. So, without further ado, that's how Google broke down the synopsis of that. Now let me get to Common Sense Media, because I usually like how they break things down, one of my favorite websites. Now, how Common Sense Media breaks down the synopsis is, in Chapter 2, after Josh Lambert, Patrick Wilson, returned from the spooky world of the dead, with his missing son Dalton, Ty Simpkins, at the end of Insidious, it seems like everything was going to be all right. Think again. The medium, Elise, is dead, and Josh is a suspect. Josh's wife, Renee, starts hearing and seeing scary things again, and even Josh doesn't seem quite right. Meanwhile, Josh's mom, Lorraine, contacts Elise's assistants, Specs and Tucker, for help, which leads them to an incident from her past. Will the family survive another trip to the further? And again, I'm not going to dive too much into this one because this is one of those movies where I know a lot of the horror fans have seen it, but I still don't want to spoil it just in case for those of you who haven't seen it. Again, check it on Max and Amazon. Is it any good? I don't know why I'm seeing some parents on here saying that their movie is for ages 10 and up. I wouldn't agree with that one. Now, again, if you want your kids to be scared, if you want them to not be able to sleep and have terrifying nightmares and come screaming fine, go right ahead. If I had a 10-year-old, definitely I wouldn't, if I had kids, I wouldn't let them watch it at 10. That's not the movie for that. So, is it any good? Parents, the parental reviews based on 12 parents gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And I don't know why I'm seeing that. This is hilarious. Kids, 66 kids gave it a review and they gave it 4 out of 5 as well. Okay. Definitely not something that my parents would have let me watch at 10, but I get, different times, I guess, and generations, time goes on and things change. This movie simply presents more of the same stuff we saw in the first movie, and it no longer feels quite so fresh. The Further, a great idea in the previous movie, is no longer an unknown entity. The characters aren't explored any more deeply, and even the ghosts have no new tricks. But just because Chapter 2 isn't as good as the original doesn't make this sequel a bad movie. I think it's nearly just as good as the first one. Like I said, the first movie I give a 9.5 or a 10. This one I'll give like 9/9.5. So it's roughly tied, but the first one just still kind of barely edges it out. But they're both kind of in that same zone. And I'd highly recommend both of them. And in my opinion, these are still the 2 best movies in the franchise. Director James Wan continues to develop his touch for truly scary horror, unlike many of today's camera shakers. Wan uses smooth, three-dimensional space and off-screen sound to generate his scares. His camera moves freely through the house, through houses and buildings, using natural obstacles like walls and doorways to generate prickly suspense. Like his film, The Conjuring, it's also refreshingly free of gore, profanity, and sex. The weird atonal score by Joseph Bashara adds another nightmarish layer. The bottom line is that it's still quite scary. So in this movie, we learned in the last movie that it wasn't the house that was haunted, it was their son Dalton. And in this movie, it's no longer the son that's haunted now, it's the father, it's Josh. Or you can straight up just say possessed, or however you want to put it. But families can talk about Chapter 2's violence, how much blood and gore is shown. Blood and gore, next to none. Now, there's a great amount of violence in it, great suspense, jump scares, some scenes of fighting. A guy uses a weapon, attempts to kill another, is unsuccessful in doing so. Do you need that stuff to make a horror movie? Meaning, do you need blood and gore to make a horror movie? Technically, no, you don't need it. Now, a lot of films choose to do that anyway, but those are mostly regarded as the slasher films, which I talk about in this show all the time. I always mention and talk about Jason, Freddy, Mike Myers, Scream, Texas Chainsaw, stuff like that. The whole thing is centered around blood and gore. That's slasher. If you think about it, that's basically what it means in a nutshell. That's what it should mean, slasher. They get slashed up by weapons, by butcher knives and machetes and chainsaws and whatnot. Is this movie scary? Yes, it is. How does it compare to other scary movies that you've seen? Well, they've kind of already laid that out earlier there. Again, this one is not a slasher. This is more so something that keeps you at the edge of your seat. Most of it is really unpredictable, to say the least. And I would say it's not quite identical to the first film, but it's very, very close to it. I would say if you've seen the first one but haven't seen the second one, you're missing out. Now, I also strongly recommend the third, fourth, and fifth, but I would say especially the first two, because, and again, that's a little bit of a biased take because those two are my favorites out in this whole franchise. So any positive messages or positive role models? Positive role models, 2 out of 5. The supporting characters, the paranormal investigators, are the ones who seem the most heroic and interesting. They're forever forging ahead into frightening and unknown situations in the quest for knowledge and also to help others. They're sympathetic, brave, and supportive. Positive messages. Characters try to help one another in this movie, even entering into frightening and potential dangerous situations in order to do so. So again, I think it's very worth it. Like I said, 9.5, Amazon and Max is where you can watch it. Like and subscribe because I have a lot more shows and videos to talk about. Check the movie out and let me know what you think.